Hey, everybody, welcome to What Drives Us, episode 357 for March 11th, 2020. My name is Russell Frost. I am your host for this week's journey into modern mobility and advanced tech. No, see, I screwed up my own intro. And sustainable energy, not advanced tech, nothing. It's modern mobility. Yeah. We have an incredible show for you. We have one subject, maybe more than one, but one subject primarily, and one incredibly special guest. So let me introduce my co-host and the panel, and we'll get to our special guest, and we'll get this show on the road. That co-host is, he's Mr. Dapper. I like to think of him as Tony Schaefer.
Hey, so yeah, these shows are always it's a sausage party. So I figured tonight I'm going to be joined by two women, thanks to New Glarus. So there it is. I also want to real quickly take some time out here. Sorry, guys, you're going to have to wait another minute. And I want to say a very special thank you to 5 individuals. Right now. Those 5 individuals are Eric Stevens, David Bonfer, Zachary Perniskliski. Sorry, Zachary. I know I always butcher your last name.
Zach.
Igor Orlovic and Rick Senta. I want to say thank you to all of you guys. And you are the ones who directly support the show through Patreon. 5. We've been doing this for 10 years. And we have 5 people who are willing to support the show. So I figure if that's one every 2 years, we're doing pretty good. But yes, definitely. I mean, we say it, and we want you to know that other than Russell, we're not in it for for the money and the glamour and the fame and the hookers and the blow. Well, okay, we just don't need the hookers, but. Anyway, thank you very much for taking that step and actually putting some money towards us. We really do appreciate it.
Of course, the only hookers Tony can afford are the 2 women in the beer.
That's it. Right here.
That came out of a bottle.
Yes. Yes. And not even Jeannie. Yeah.
Well, the man that just spoke before is our friend in Boulder, Colorado. He is the founder and owner of Boulder Hybrids. We know him as Paul Guzik.
Everybody, glad to be back. I might appear a little tired because we've been packing and moving our shop this week, so I'll try to stay awake as long as I can.
Oh, man. And when you talk about packing and moving an auto shop, there's nothing light. There's nothing made out of styrofoam or plastic.
It's literally tons of stuff we are moving.
Yeah.
Like 200 Prius batteries, engines, hoists, toolboxes, parts. Yeah.
I offered
to
come out and help Paul, and he graciously did not take me up on that offer. Paul, thank you again for that. I appreciate that.
I don't want to put anyone through that.
You never know. Speaking of putting people through things, my friend in the Pacific Northwest, he graciously handles all of our news and exciting postings on alternate social media sites on top of running, or at least the social media wing of the OEVA.org. I like to think of him as Patrick Connor.
Hello, wherever and whenever you are. Thanks for joining us, and it's going to be a great show.
There we go. Oh, thank you, Patrick. Next to him, at least on my screen, is our friend in the Mid-Atlantic region. Whatever happened to your posters, Casey?
They're right here. They're waiting to get framed.
They used to be hanging up in the back. I just,
because they were curling under the other direction than when I was uncurling them. And so I was like, well, let me lay them flat. That way they don't curl.
Absolutely. He is our Tesla expert and Tesla owner. And, of course, he reviews superchargers on his own YouTube channel. Mr. Casey.
Certainly.
Hey, Casey.
We've had great weather this week, so loving it.
Great weather?
Great weather.
Well, it could be worse.
Hey.
Well, the young lady who just signed on is one of our newest panelists. And she is a writer, a director, a photographer, a videographer. She does a whole bunch of things, but I don't have an official bio even for her yet. But I am very glad to welcome Miss Georgia McKenzie.
Hello, Georgia.
Uh-oh.
Oh, she's muted.
George is muted.
Hello.
You're muted, Georgia.
I think it's on your end.
I don't think. Did I
No,
do that?
It's on her end.
Uh-oh. She's done. Nope. Maybe she froze. Well, we'll go on. Georgia will hopefully join us again. Our friend in the Great White North, he is the host of the Tesla Life. And you can find him, of course, on Twitter in 2 different forms, and I'll let him mention them if and when he decides to. Mr. Mark Coughlin.
Hello, everyone. You can follow us at the Tesla Life, and also you can follow our Waterloo Region group at WREVA Group. And welcome to the show. We've got a fantastic topic to go through tonight.
We have one topic. We have to and it's not because there's a lack of topics. It's because we wanted to do it.
Well, there's a lot of discussion for this topic, I'm sure.
And God, I can call John a friend. He's been a friend of mine for a long time. John is an eminent journalist who ran for more than a decade Green Car Reports. You now see his writing all over the place on the net. One of the, I don't know, greatest, I think, working mobility journalists right now, Mr. John Voelcker, joining us by telephone, by the way. No phone, just that static, wonderful picture of John.
Hashtag blush.
Nice.
John, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, my pleasure. Joining you from an undisclosed location in the somewhat snowy northeastern U.S.
There
we go.
Got it.
If you don't follow Mr. Voelcker on Twitter, that's your mistake, and you should. But definitely, John is here because I invited him and I wanted to talk about this. And so what I want to talk about is this. Last week, GM announced that they had was it $20 billion? Was that the number? $20 billion plan to roll out electric vehicles, that electric vehicles were GM's future. Mary Barra, or Barra, if you please, came out and said that, while GM owns the central part of the U.S., it's had trouble on the coasts, and she believes this is part because they don't have a good alt-car strategy, a good electric car strategy. We'll talk about whether or not that's the reality of it or not. But nonetheless, GM rolled out an arguably compelling plan to release some new vehicles. Now, here's where it starts to get ugly, and I want to encourage anyone to jump in there anytime they want. There was some talk like the new Bolt is going to end. There was some new Bolt specs, and then the conversation instantly went where it always goes with electric vehicles. How does it stack up against Tesla? A comparison which in a sense is super important and I couldn't care less about. So because I think that there are things that stand on their own. That wasn't me putting down Tesla. That was me saying that for instance, I think the Leaf is a great EV. I think the Bolt is a great EV. Does it compare dollar for dollar, pound for pound to other things? Is it the best? My point was that I think it's a good solution for some people and that we need a variety of options. We don't just need one very, very best company. So now I'm going to turn it over to...
Yeah, we did the 1960s bug and everybody had one. It's time for there to be a variety.
And I honestly, I want to say I kind of had mixed expectations coming into this show, because I figured it could go one of two ways. Either we could be talking the battery and and GM's approach, or we could just turn it into here's how it stacks against Tesla. And I mean, we've heard it so many times. Something has to be a Prius killer, and then it has to be a Tesla killer, and it has to be. So we don't want anything to kill anyone.
There's not enough of them to kill, yeah.
Yeah, and we do have to accept the fact that even though we have no lack of news to talk about on a weekly basis, alternative fuel vehicles still represent something less than 3% of new car sales. Yep. So we need new battery tech. We need major players. We need to get the other 97%, and that's huge. It took 15 years to go from, more than 15 years, to go from even an introduction of hybrids in the U.S. market to 3%.
And people still don't trust
I
them.
think this is where I weigh in.
Go,
Yeah,
John,
please.
go.
All right.
So a couple things. First, full disclosure, I was one of several dozen journalists who GM provided airfare, lodging, and meals to enable me to cover this event in person and talk to the executives during the event, which lasted several hours in Warren, Michigan at GM's Tech Center. So I want to put that up out front so listeners understand how this game is played, okay?
Sure.
The second thing is that indeed GM has for a while, not sure if it's a year or 2 years, had this essential overarching vision that they say they believe the future is one in regard to vehicles that has no emissions, no crashes, and no congestion.
Right.
That sounds great. I mean, who wouldn't want to have a car under those circumstances? And it obviously wraps in self-driving vehicles, electrified vehicles, and all the rest of it, including connectivity in shared vehicles. But it's a long way, and it's quite clear that the company, which got rid of most of its passenger vehicles in favor of doubling down on trucks, SUVs, and crossovers, is not quite there yet. So this event was one of several, and there will be more, although one got canceled due to current health circumstances. That is GM's attempt to persuade the world, and more specifically financial analysts and investors, that in fact GM, one of the 4 largest car companies in the world, is in fact worth more than it is now, because the day this event was held, Tesla's market capitalization exceeded that of GM plus Ford plus Fiat Chrysler by a healthy margin. And that's a little embarrassing for GM plus Ford plus Fiat Chrysler.
Right.
So they held a large event. They did something that auto companies occasionally but rarely do, which is showed a lot of future vehicles, some of them as fully fleshed out concepts. The 2 that spring to mind there are the ones that they talked about. The Cadillac Lyriq, which is a luxury midsize SUV, all electric, and the GMC Hummer EV SUT, which stands for Sport Utility Truck, which is kind of like the H2 SUT of a while back, which is a 4-door pickup truck with a short, somewhat functional pickup bed and the approximate aerodynamics of a small municipal hospital. Which will also be all electric, hence the name Hummer. Get it? Hummer, it hums. Get it? Get it? And,
Sorry, I think Toyota trademarked that.
No, wait, Mazda. Other cars go boing, boing, boing. Our car goes, You're old enough to remember that Mazda ad, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm holding up my hand.
I don't know that I am. I just remember the Toyota, the Hum commercial.
Really?
I don't remember that one. What was that?
Toyota
That was
Hum?
the
Remember
Toyota
Voelcker,
Hum commercial.
da.
That was as the car went through the and all the plants and everything were made of people in costumes and funky hats. And the little girl who was like 12 years old wrote and sang the song.
No, she wasn't.
Oh, God.
But yeah,
Okay.
the Harmony commercial.
Bright colors?
Yeah.
Yeah, bright colors, and if you watch the commercial, you had to look really close to realize that all the scenery and everything were people.
Yeah. No. This is 20 years before, 30 years before that. This is the 70s, wasn't it?
Yeah, the Mazda one.
I'm sorry, John. Am I outing you as like? You know.
Back in my day, funny things were different.
Right.
Okay, boomers.
Okay,
Let's
boomer.
move on.
Hey.
Truly.
Only you guys.
Yeah.
Anyway, so GM really held this event to say, look, we really truly are serious about electric cars. And by my count, they showed or described a dozen different battery electric vehicles. Now, two of them were Chevrolet Bolt EVs. That's Bolt with a B, like boy. And I say this because my last name begins with V like Victor, and I am painfully aware of the difficulty in people have between discerning B and V, not even getting into Spanish language speakers. So when you hear even executives at the company saying, no, Bolt with a B, not Bolt with a V, you know they had a naming problem. However, two of the 12 vehicles were Bolt models. One was the 2021 Bolt EV. That's the current car we know with a new front end and new taillights. The battery got upgraded for 2021. This is for 2020. Sorry, this is the 2021. It will have new seats, which will make a lot of potential shoppers happy. And it will have a number of other upgrades.
Is this the Super Cruise one?
Sorry, guys. The other one was the Bolt EUV, which stands for Electric Utility Vehicle. Think SUV, but electric, which was widely expected to be the sort of crossover Bolt. It is longer, 3 inches longer in the wheelbase, 5 inches longer overall, squarer. Doesn't actually share any body panels with the current car, but it looks like it. You'll sort of look at it and say, yeah, that's a Bolt. I said it was supposed to be the crossover version. There are two things. Number one, it is confirmed by one GM exec, not going to have all-wheel drive. And for those of us in the Northeast who get things like snow, along with the other 70% of Americans who get snow, that's kind of a problem. And the other thing is they're not going to change the fast charging. So the fast charging is limited to a maximum of 50 kilowatts at a time when Hyundai and Kia are putting 100 kilowatts, or theoretically 100 kilowatts, I should say, in their mass market vehicles, and the rest of the world is planning to go considerably above that. But the two Bolt vehicles out of the dozen are sort of old technology. They say, look, we launched these cars in 2016. They were the last generation platform, the last generation batteries. This event is predominantly about what's coming, starting in production in the second half of next year, 2021. And GM had previously announced that they were devoting their entire Detroit Hamtramck plant to producing battery electric vehicles. Now, that's a plant that had produced a whole mishmash of cars. It produced some Cadillac sedans. It produced the Chevy Impala. It also produced two generations of Chevrolet Volt. That's Volt with a V, the plug-in hybrid one. And it was on the list of, as they say, unassigned plants. It is now going to be where they make battery electric vehicles solely, although the Bolt with a B stays in its plant, which is Orion, Michigan. Excuse me, I'm not a Michigander. It's called Orion. It's spelled like the star, but you call it Orion. And if you say that the other way, they look at you strangely. Oh, you're not from here. Make a note. So anyway, the 10 vehicles were the new battery electric platform. And Jim talks about how it's going to be, it's basically a skateboard. You can have a motor in the front, you can have a motor in the rear, or you can have motors in both places, right? Fairly standard. They talked a lot about what they call their Ultium, U-L-T-I-U-M, great name, right? Their Ultium battery system, next generation cells, and they're going to build an entire cell fabrication facility with their partner, LG Chem. It's a joint venture right next to the old assembly plant they decommissioned in Lordstown, Ohio. But it'll be a fully modern next-gen cell fab plant to feed these vehicles that they're going to produce. They talked a little bit about the cell chemistry. So, by the way, interrupt me because I can go on like this for hours and hours until the equipment rusts or the audience falls asleep or dies. So just interrupt if I'm...
Well, I'm just the one thing I'm going to throw in a little comedic break here, because I hope they come up with a sibling version, a sister technology, if you will, for the Ultium battery, and they call this one Ultium with an O instead of a U.
Oh, jeez.
So the facelift Bolt, that's the one that's getting the Super Cruise, or is it the new?
The one Bolt with a B that they have said will get Super Cruise, the first car outside the Cadillac brand to do so, is the Bolt EUV, the supposed crossover.
The other one should have had it from the start.
Indeed, I have read those criticisms. There has been a certain amount of surprise that adaptive cruise control is not offered on that car.
Yeah.
I did actually talk to the product manager in 2016, and he said that car was developed so fast that they had to make some hard choices about things they did not include. One of the things they did not include was the ability to do a right-hand drive version. So the car is not sold in Japan, but it's also not sold in the UK, which is now not a problem because they don't own Opel anymore, so they have no need to sell in the UK. But he said, in addition to right-hand drive, one of the things that they simply didn't have time to fit to get the car out on schedule was adaptive cruise. Now, it's now in its 4th model year. Next year will be its 5th model year. You might think that over that time they could maybe get it in there, so we'll see.
Okay.
Are sales that good, though, that they
good point.
don't have to pay any attention to what consumers could possibly want? Because that sounds to me like if you're going to charge that much for a car, you might as well give people bang for their buck. And I think they're missing bang for their buck on that one.
For sure.
Well, so here is one of the frames that is maybe more important in the world outside electric car advocates, and that is that GM claims that the new vehicles that it sells on this BEV3 platform, the Bolt with a B was BEV2, and the Spark EV was BEV1, which I suppose makes the EV1 BEV0. But anyway, GM claims that these... Chelsea and I have talked about this at great length. Jim claims that the new vehicles will be profitable from day one. When they start rolling off the lines in the second half of 2021 in Detroit Hamtramck, they will be profitable. Now, there's a couple of things. We don't know what they're charging for them, and it is arguable that since these are all large to very large, mostly luxury brands, and high performance, the GM is going to charge a bucket load of money for them. So if you're selling an $80,000 battery electric vehicle with 0 to 60 acceleration in 3 seconds, you can charge more money for it than if it's, you'll excuse me, Bolt EV drivers in the audience, a nerdy, somewhat undesirable 5-door compact hatchback that is in a segment that is declining in the general North American market.
As a nerdy 5-door hatchback owner, I'm feeling very personally attacked right now.
And I want to assure you that I support and empower you in that viewpoint.
But the strategy makes sense, right?
Yeah,
if you're going to roll out new technology that is expensive, you put it in your expensive cars where you can tolerate the cost. That makes sense to me.
Because that's the way the auto industry has done it for 130 years. Think of anything from electric self-starters to automatic
Airbags.
transmission, to air conditioning, disc
Power
brakes,
windows.
fuel injection, turbos, airbags. It all came in at the top end.
Yep, makes perfect sense.
So you mentioned that they were going to build a battery plant with LG. Is this going to be in the same vein as Tesla and Panasonic?
Hopefully a little bit
Softball.
less acrimonious. But
Well, yeah, hopefully.
yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things. LG Chem won the bake-off for the Chevy Volt in about 2009. So GM and LG have worked together for a long time. They know each other really well, and just coincidentally, as these things happen, the CEO of LG Chem's North American battery group is the woman who started GM's battery testing lab for the Volt before it launched. You know, just a coincidence.
Yeah. There's
So, no,
Embrace and extend.
so in that sense, they are comfortable with each other. They very likely are co-developing cells, somewhat like Tesla and Panasonic do. But from what I hear and understand about Tesla and Panasonic, the two companies don't necessarily always see eye to eye. I'm sure that's the case with GM and LG as well, but I would hazard a guess that at this stage they might be a little more comfortable with each other.
They probably don't have a
And
fight
they
every
have-
quarter.
I'm sorry?
They probably don't have a fight every quarter.
Well, that, you know, anytime they go off quietly, you know, without their respective spouses is purely for business.
Yeah.
But they have taken what was a supplier relationship and they're moving into a joint venture, which brings them a little bit closer together, but also gives GM a clearer first shot at the production out of that plant and more of an argument to say, you know what, we want to have exclusive dibs on the chemistry for the cells that are coming out of this plant.
Yeah.
Now, part of the presentation at GM EV Day was not only that the Ultium battery system has very flexible formats, and there were a variety of presentations. The skateboard can do sort of slim, regular, or tall stacks of modules. There are different module formats that can accommodate not only the pouch cells we use here in North America, but also the prismatic cells that are much more common in China. So the message here was that GM is designing a single platform on which it can build vehicles of different sizes and battery architecture that can accommodate cells from different makers in different companies, in different countries or regions that can be stacked in different ways to allow very different vehicle segments and configurations.
So
Go on.
GM introduced us to the modern skateboard concept, 25 years ago? And it's now
I want to say
making it?
2001. When was that, though? Yes.
Before it was called Voltec, it was their Flex architecture or something.
Yeah, the fuel cell.
Well, it was E-Flex, but even
E-Flex,
before that, it was, there was a name, and I'm forgetting it. Sorry, guys.
Before the high wire, too, right?
The high wire, but did the skateboard have a name itself?
It did. I can't remember the exact name of it. But they were selling
That's
us
the
on
one.
swappable bodies and how everything would fit and
Yeah.
be quicker. So this is finally realizing that in a production car.
Wow.
And that was 20 or more years.
I just found an article from 2008 talking about the Volt E-Flex. I'm trying to go farther back.
Yeah. Well, and that was one of the challenges with the Volt, was that in the end they did not end up doing a dedicated skateboard. They took their C-segment architecture, basically chopped off everything behind the toe board, and shoved in a T-pack to make the Volt. But they were still proportionally stuck with a compact car architecture as opposed to being able to do something more like the Tesla Model 3, for example, which has a low nose and a short nose, and hence gives you more cabin space for a given wheelbase.
Do you think that GM's, in trying to cover everything, cylindrical and prismatic cells, for instance, rather than picking one, certainly that gives them more options, but do you think that maybe they're trying to do too much?
I could probably make that argument. I think it's way too early to tell.
Sure.
I would say, though, that one of the things that I try to convey when I write that is often underappreciated in this continent we happen to live in is that North America is not driving the bus globally on electric vehicles. China is. Yeah. If you look at the data in 2019, China bought more cars with plugs than the entire rest of the world combined. China bought, I'm going to get this wrong, it's 1.4 or 1.6 million plug-in cars.
Wow.
North America bought 330,000, which is minor compared to China.
Yeah.
So,
but is that
the way
real
I see
EVs or those like shitty neighborhood EVs that they sell over there?
No, the Chinese numbers now are proper highway capable EVs. It's a good point that you raise, and I wrote about that. In 2016 or thereabouts, they had a lot of neighborhood EVs. Now they have to be highway capable. So these are essentially real electric cars. They would not certify as saleable here in North America,
right,
for safety and a whole variety of other reasons, but they are viable, sort of full-speed cars.
And then, in addition to those, they have, we've talked about like battery swappable scooters and, various other transportation modes that are battery powered. I mean, I'm just saying, in addition to the 1-some million highway rated cars, they're also kicking the world's butt in other modes of transportation.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's the largest market on the planet.
Yeah, and just reiterating what you were saying about they're the ones making the, we're not the ones leading the world.
Well, I don't.
Well,
think
but it's also important to point out here that China. So, the context is China's government industrial complex has had for 15 years a plan, and the plan is to own the world's largest share of production of, number one, photovoltaic cells. Put a tick mark next to it, it's done. Mm-hmm. They produce more solar cells than anyone else. Number two, lithium-ion battery cells. That one's in process, but the volumes are going to end up in China. Do they have the ultimate, sort of 10,000th of a percentage point of reliability? Maybe not yet. And they tend to skew toward different chemistries, but they will get there in volume. So that will be a tick mark in the future. And number three is plug-in vehicles. That one's early days yet, but look at the numbers. And to achieve those three interlocking goals, the Chinese national government offers a few carrots, and they have a whole bunch of really big sticks. And they will employ them energetically to make sure that China ends up where they want it to be.
I'm going to ask one of my pointed questions. Do you think that some of this is our own reticence here in the States to deal with new technologies that are sustainable, just because literally you can't eat a freaking vegetarian burger without it turning into a political statement? And instead of people focusing on, like you said, a 15-year plan, people decided to, we had too much push and pull where somebody's going to dig in their heels just because it's a change and it's pushed for something that's on another side of the political spectrum.
A lot of things packed into that.
Yeah.
You're right.
So,
I'm a good packer. Sorry.
I'm not going to touch that one. So, in broad plan, I think the answer is yes. I would point out respectfully that the U.S. has no energy plan beyond drill, baby, drill. It has zero climate plan. I mean, the rest of the world does actually accept science.
No, the U.S. plan is to shut off the EPA.
Yeah.
Right.
Indeed.
You guys
And
the plan.
But the U.S. also has some special circumstances that make the reticence to adopt EVs somewhat more understandable in context.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Unlike China, unlike Europe, we have zero mass transit between relevant city pairs, which is essentially 150 to 320 miles apart.
Yes.
In Europe, you wouldn't necessarily think of driving from Detroit to Chicago because there are clean, affordable, centrally located trains that are safe, that are pleasant, that are smooth, that have Wi-Fi, and cost less than the gasoline and tolls to get there.
Why do you hate America so much?
You beat me to it, frankly. That's one of my common riposts on Twitter. And I would point out, I don't live in America. I live in a small, semi-autonomous island state off the coast of Jersey that was founded by the Dutch and runs kind of like Canada. Now, I think of it as New Amsterdam, although I gather that recently people have started to call it Manhattan. So yeah, it's very different there.
They have public transit.
The point is more, it's also about zoning. Guys, America, since the Second War, has spent 70 years building very nice houses for single families in residential-only zoning that is extremely low density by global standards, and that is, by zoning law, separated by miles from your job and from wherever you have to go to buy a half gallon of milk.
And they don't even have sidewalks in some cases.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in fact, walking or cycling is actively discouraged and sometimes questioned by the police. So we have built a built environment that much of America thinks is standard and the way that life is, that makes coherent transport policy as it is understood by China, Europe, and other developed parts of the world almost impossible, because people say, yes, it would be great if there were mass transit, but the density is not there because no one will take 6-story apartment buildings next to their half-acre homes in order to justify the mass transit line. I can go on like this, so I'm going to back off because we're talking about GM EVs. But does that help answer your question?
Yeah.
So, John, let me ask you this.
Yep.
The gestalt of the GM presentation. What did you think? I mean, give me some sort of concise summation. Realistic, not realistic. I mean, you and I kind of went back and forth on Twitter about one small aspect of it. And of course, I was right.
Of course you were.
I haven't seen it, but I'm going to go with John.
Russell went off
on Twitter. I was waiting for someone on my panel to give me the shiv. That's fine. But I just wondered what your thought was, and kind of go around the panel and get their thoughts as well. But we'll start with John.
Actually, I'd like to hear the panel first.
Okay, let's do that then. Patrick.
Yeah, okay. I watched the event. I really liked what GM was saying. I liked that they're saying the future is all electric. I liked that they're saying 400 miles range. I liked that they were saying fast charging at speeds beyond what the Bolt has been stuck with. But I'm worried. They don't have a lot of credibility for what they've done with the Bolt over the years they've had it. The innovation pace has just been so slow. And then there was a couple things. The next day I saw, I think it was their CFO on some finance channel, and she said something like, "We're going to get our fair share on the coasts now." I'm like, well, you're not due anything. You have to earn that. So it's not that, so the sense of entitlement I didn't like. And then charging networks, they seem to have this, well, that's not our responsibility attitude. And they did talk about how they're involved in the SAE and they help develop the standards, but helping develop a standard doesn't give me someplace I can plug in my car if I bought one. So I'm hopeful but concerned. There you go.
Mark.
I have a problem with the size of the battery and probably pricing themselves out of the market. When it comes to saying they're going to have a 200 kilowatt battery to power a larger SUV in the future, I think they're going to have a vehicle that's going to be $100,000 easy. And I just wonder how many of those vehicles are going to be sold based on that price tag. It's something that concerns me. Don't get me wrong. I believe and I've seen the Bolt be a great EV. It's good for a segment of the population. It's great for people to get involved with an EV. It gives you some usable range. But you get into a vehicle that has 200 kilowatt hours of battery, I can just see it, coming out at $125,000. And it's just, I'm looking for vehicles to come down in price that, still have usable range. And unfortunately, with the spattering of CUVs, large vehicles that they are proposing to develop, I'm just scared that it's not coming to a point where it's getting the price down of these vehicles. The price is just going to go up.
But they do sell a stupid amount of Escalades, where the starting price is 75 grand.
And that's, is that their cue to sell it for 125? I don't understand that. I just don't think that market is there.
I mean, this is a whole other show, but there's the recent, what was it? I think it was a GM person that was saying, talking about 96-month car loans. Mm-hmm. And obviously that's a big part of making a $70,000 SUV truck affordable, quote unquote, is you sell it to somebody over a period of 8 years, which was unthinkable 5 years ago. Yeah. I'm sorry. I don't mean to jump in here. Georgia.
Yes.
What, I don't know. I'm sorry because we've had some technical problems. I know you haven't been privy to all of this, but any sort of roundup, any sort of summation?
I'm going to give you both my marketing summation and my bitchy summation. Okay. My marketing summation is, this looks to me like they're making a big mistake with high-end luxury vehicles that do not make an effective change in increasing the market share of electric cars to the common man. And I understand that might not be who they're looking to target, but nobody wants to be paying off a freaking car for 8 damn years to have a 70 or 100K car. And I don't care how much you think it adds to your inches or your ball size, it's not worth the stress. And we are all under so much freaking stress already. Why the bleep would I even buy this stupid car when I can buy a decent car that's got good gas mileage and can actually park in a freaking parking spot with not much trouble? If it suits you, perfect. But it doesn't sound like a wise choice. It sounds like way too much money. And if you were going to wait this long to develop something, then why the hell wouldn't you freaking develop the best possible version of it and really push the envelope if you want to claim that leadership mantle? Tesla is out there, and Lord knows I can't stand Elon Musk, but okay, he's got that glorious mantle of developer. You are an old company. Do something with your old and your staid image and actually break the envelope and push it forward. And I don't feel that this is what it's doing. Bitchy take, did I really need one more wealthy person pretending to be broke and sustainable? It's like watching somebody buy a tiny house for $100,000. Dude, it's 600 square feet and it's got this, that, and the other, and it's so sustainable. And I'm like, no, it's not. Because if you're going to be able to pay 600 square feet for a $100,000 tiny house that you still have to go out and buy the damn land for, it's stupid. And that's my take. Sorry.
No, that was beautiful.
Yeah, that was great.
Well done, Mr.
Russell.
Oh,
if the title of this show is not inches and ball size, I will be very disappointed.
Can I tell you that we got demonetized from my show title last week, which I changed within 24 hours. I'm just saying, we're not mentioning any.
Russell, I'm just saying that if you have inches and ball size, that's automatically an increase in your paycheck. Go for it.
So much about my life. I know now. I understand. It all drops into context here, and I've got to go kill myself.
What aesthetics are for.
Yeah. Mr. Guzik, tell me.
I guess my feeling is if GM really wants to push EV technology and make an affordable product, and use the same skateboard and make the Escalade or whatever they want for the high-end market, but make something that can really impact the common average people, and Elon kind of did that. I mean, the Model 3 is still not cheap, but it's semi-affordable, and they started with the expensive car to get the money coming in. But GM has way more resources than Tesla, and if they put their mind to it, they could probably do something.
Do they have more resources than Tesla?
If they cut their dividend, they certainly could afford to do a lot. But that Wall Street would not appreciate that.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's true.
Capitalism. Casey?
Yeah. So almost my entire life, GM has always talked a good game, and like their concept is on point, 100%. It's ready to go. And then I've owned a couple GMs. When they actually get there, they're like 80% of the way there, and you get this, and it's like, this is a really cool car, but it's not what they sold me 10 years ago. And they've been doing this since at least the 90s that I've been keeping track. And they know what they need to do, but will they actually do it? And then like Patrick said, right now I don't have to think about where I'm going to do my cross-country trips because I've got a charging network. I just put it in the GPS and I go. I mean, I can do the numbers if I want to. If I want to get there like 5 minutes faster, or if I don't want to stop at the routes that the map has picked for me. But that's not an option with what they're proposing, and I want them to succeed because, like Tony said earlier, we're less than 3%, and we need to be at well over 90, and pooping on them on the way over is not going to help us get there, but. I feel like Charlie Brown and Lucy. Go ahead.
They've done some stinkers with their, at least the plug-in hybrid, like the Cadillac ELR.
Yeah,
they went after the high end.
Awesome, and then it went like it was more than a Tesla.
And I knew a car dealer in town that was selling one, and the depreciation on that car was $26 a mile. Like it was the worst car ever.
Wow.
And they sold like 14 of them. It's like, who made that decision at GM?
Let's be clear. Nobody's really delivered on the affordable EV thing. Nobody.
We're close. We're not there, but we're close. We can see it. We can see it.
We can argue close, but nobody's really done it. I mean, the closest thing was the Mitsubishi i-MiEV, which arguably lots of people hated, but it was cheap.
I could argue the Nissan Leaf. I could argue the Nissan Leaf is affordable.
Yeah,
right.
It is.
Right.
Yeah.
Because in certain places the Leaf with tax credits is under 20K.
Yeah.
And that's definitely in the look, I mean, I've never spent more than 30 grand on a car. I admit it. I'm a bottom feeder, okay? Anyway, I'm sorry. Mark,
already did mine. Yep.
You already did use Tony then.
My Prius Prime is the most expensive car I've ever purchased at $32,000. Yeah. Bottom feeder. I know, right? I suck. So, basically, I agree with what everyone, it is in just one. I agree with what everyone has been saying. GM has historically talked a big game, but I feel like, they're trying to steer the barge. It's a big legacy company, and they're established and they're entrenched. And now the writing, we've been saying it for years, the writing is on the wall. The big corporations need to get in line. And they should have done this 5 years ago, and they didn't. So now here they are, and they want to say, hey, me too. And they're trying to steer the barge like they're doing a slalom course. And you just can't do that. They can say all they want, like everyone is saying, but yeah, they better deliver. And if this new battery architecture, the small bricks that allegedly are intelligent and they talk to one another, and if they can just put down a few of them for a small car or build up more as the car size increases, I think that's super cool. That's a great thing. But again, I've only seen pictures. Like Paul always says, I'm going to believe it when I see it on a dealer's lot. And if they're talking 4 or 5 years or something, or whatever, before we see it mainstream in multiple vehicles, by that time, other car manufacturers have 4 or 5 more years to develop better and cooler things, Tesla included.
I mean, they should almost do like a Skunks Work unit out in Silicon Valley, completely away from the corporate culture, and come up with something new, and rebrand it. Kind of like there's like the Millennial Hotel Moxie by Marriott, right? It's Marriott people aren't going to go there, but they're going after a younger, hipper crowd, and they branded it that way.
But they know how to do this. They've done it with the Volt. They did it with the EV1. They've done this before. What they need to get the team together again.
Some of their stuff is great. Like I sold 2 used Volts last week, 17s, and both people love them once I educated them on how good they are. Yeah. But they were people that said, I'd never buy a GM car. They're shitty cars, Yeah. So GM has done a shitty job of improving their image, especially on new technology.
So like what you're saying is Skunk Works to come out with, better cars. And they could call it, it wouldn't be a
call
GM.
It Scion or some other brand that.
Yeah, no, I mean, they would instead of making General
Scion
Motors,
today?
instead of making General Motors, they would make better motors. And so no one would confuse GM with BM.
Specialty motors.
See, they would make better motors.
You've been planning that line for a long time, haven't you?
I have. I really have.
It was a nice lead-in, though. I think you deserve kudos for that one.
Okay, show title: GM is
BM. One second, John, and then it's all the floor is yours, sir. But I think the elephant in the room that we haven't talked about too is the dealer network, and we're talking about a very special group of people when we're talking about GM dealers.
That's a whole show right there.
So and overcoming that, and should it be a separate brand, and yada yada yada. There's a whole bunch of stuff there, but the idea of dumping high-end electric vehicles into a dealership that has no background, no history with it, no affinity for it, is a gutsy move on GM's part. Anyway, I'm sorry. John Voelcker, your thoughts, please.
Well, I pretty much love and mostly agree with what everybody has said, which because
except
it's all
for me, right?
Saved me a lot of time. But well, not you, but
okay.
I actually thought the elephant in the room, and I expected someone to mention it, was that unlike Ford, BMW, Honda, and Volkswagen, GM did not do a deal with the California Air Resources Board to bargain slightly on their version of the CAFE standards, but in fact joined the Trump administration in trying to remove California's ability to set emission standards. This came up earlier at a GM event I went to. It did not come up at GM EV Day, which is kind of a shame. because it's always good to get them to dance in front of more journalists.
That's
But
because that's a good way to have your reimbursement receipts sent back to you.
I can't comment on that. I've never had them sent back. But I could probably make the case why GM would prefer a national standard. Well, it's sort of obvious why they prefer a national standard. But there are so many things here. One of them is that, and I said it earlier, GM has said they will be profitable on electric cars from day one. Tesla does not have to be profitable. Tesla, thus far, through its history, has lost tens of billions of dollars. Let's be clear, it has mostly been highly unprofitable. It has had a couple of profitable quarters of late. It's very possible that string will increase and it will become net positive, not using Tesla math, but in fact, generally accepted accounting principles, the ones that, real companies have to use in their financials. But GM has made it very clear since the bailout, it will sacrifice market share and sales numbers for profitability. So they view electric cars as a necessity to some degree, but they are really no longer willing to sell them at any kind of volume at a loss. So they say across the mix of battery pack sizes from 50 kilowatt hours to 200, and we don't know any of the specs yet on any of the trucks, that they will be profitable, or they will be profitable overall. I mean, there are lots of ways to hide that stuff. But, I mean, a lot of the points that y'all have raised are completely right. A 200 kilowatt hour battery pack is going to be an expensive vehicle. They've done essentially nothing on fast charging. Their phone app for the Bolt EV with a B is actually better than people give it credit for, because it now will map you through a variety of charging stations and say how long you need to stay at each one. And it bundles in billing for several of the charging networks. So you don't have to set up that individual account with Greenlots after you set up your account with, PlugShare, after you set up your account with fill in the blank. So that's a good thing. It's something that didn't get a lot of press. It is making it closer to competitive. They tend to want a lot of press every time they have a new software release, which I've tried to tell them is not really appropriate. But in any event, the biggest thing here is that, okay, GM is going to have a platform with very flexible battery architecture for building battery electric vehicles all over the world in a variety of segments and sizes that saves them money. My biggest question really is volume. If you look at the number of vehicles that could come out of the battery plant they've announced, and you wrap in Cruise Origins, which is the electric self-driving shuttle that they announced that will be built at some point, and the Cadillac Lyriq and the GMC Hummer EV and so on, which are likely to have big battery packs, you end up in the hundreds of thousands of cars, not in the millions of cars. They did announce that they expect to be producing 1 million battery electric vehicles globally by 2025. That was the old VW goal from about 3 years ago. Each company makes about 10 million cars a year globally. So they're saying by 2025, about 10% of the cars we make globally will be battery electric. What they wouldn't say at the event, despite being asked, was numbers for China versus numbers for North America, because we're Americans and we think it's all about us, because obviously it's all about us, right? So if you assume that 2/3 of that million goes to China, then let's say you have another 30,000 or something going to rest of the world. That gives you 300,000 vehicles, or maybe 250,000 vehicles in 2025, battery electric for the States. if in fact they produce the 10 different models that they showed or referred to, that's only 25 or 30,000 a year of each of them. They'll have the same underpinnings in different variations, but they sold 25,000 Bolt EVs in 2017 or 2018, I can't remember which. So what we're talking about is not huge volumes. And to underscore the point, my apologies, I forget who made it. These are going to be expensive vehicles, which is how they're going to be profitable. But the net is that it looks to me GM has reverted to the traditional model from 130 years of automobiles of pioneering expensive new technology first at the top end, which is exactly what Tesla did. They had the Roadster, all 2,600 of them, for 100,000 and change. And then the Model S came in at 75,000. Not affordable, more than twice the average price of a car, right? So what we're saying essentially is that by 2023 or 2025, GM in North America is going to be where Tesla was in 2014, but nominally profitable.
That does not sound good at all.
Everything you said makes perfect sense, and the conclusion is pretty horrible.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's
But it's still
2020.
better than it's still better than where they're at today.
It's true.
Yeah. Well, remind me who's the Prius owner here?
That's me, Tony.
Okay. So as a tedious automotive historian, I'm going to make
He's going to
the
start
following
trash talking the
suggestion.
Prius.
I noticed
Only
Paul
in the
didn't
most
hold his hand
possible
up.
supportive
Right.
and empowering
I
way. I want you to feel empowered by my comments.
Oh, jeez. Oh, God, here it comes.
So the Prius, I would argue, was an anomaly and an exception to the way that automobiles, pioneering automobile technology, gets developed globally for a century. Toyota did that project starting with a proposal in the early 90s that because of overpopulation and a fear that we would run out of oil, they wanted to make a car that had double the fuel economy of the very best car that they sold. That's where the Prius came from.
Well, I mean, we could do an entire show on that
Yeah.
and the supercar initiative that the
Yeah,
United
that's-
States
that was
had.
good.
Let me finish.
Okay,
I
yeah.
promise it's no more than 28 more sentences, honest. What I think people thought they learned from the Prius is that new technology for efficiency, number one, has to be spread across affordable mass market cars from the start to lower cost, hence the Nissan Leaf. And number two, has to be strange and identifiable from a distance so people know that you're driving a different kind of car, hence the Nissan Leaf. What Tesla did was very different. They said, we're not going to try to make a $30,000 Tesla. We're coming in at the high end, and we're going to make a car that is stunning looking, that is desirable on its own merits, that has a charging network. Oh, and by the way, it's electric. Oh, and it kicks the, the Hellcat in the cojones at drag strips. Did we mention that? So Tesla, which is iconoclastic and non-traditional in so many ways, took the traditional route of automotive development, whereas GM, with the EV1, which was small, with the Spark EV, which was small, with the Volt, which was a cramped four-seater, as much as I love it, with the Bolt EV, which was an upright, somewhat. Say again?
The Bolt is a 4.5-seater. I know, I own one.
I don't want to be your half, son. But anyway, the idea here is that those who followed the Prius model may have taken the wrong lessons. And I think over time, the Prius will be seen as an anomaly in how you develop new technology. I think Tesla had it right. I don't know if there will ever be a $22,000 Tesla. I don't think it's in their DNA because I think they're trying to build BMW, not Ford. But they have gotten it down to the point, and used Teslas are actually kind of the affordable ones now, but they have gotten it down to the point where they are affordable by much of the market, if not the mass market. I think GM is where Tesla was 10 years ago, and that's, in the end, the disturbing thing. And I will leave you only with the final question that a lot of us have been hashing over for a week now. Does GM really believe this notion of an emissions-free future, or are they reluctantly doing it because they are being pushed by regulators in China? They're not in the EU anymore, and they know that probably the existing CAFE standards are going to stick in the US because the Trump administration's lackeys are incapable of doing real math, and so they can't set up a circumstance under which they can legally and justifiably change CAFE. So GM sees, you know what, those are probably the standards. So we have to have some zero-emission vehicles, and the Californians and the rest of the states, we're going to do it. And you know what? The Hummer looked like a Hummer, and if it's zero emissions, what a better reset for a brand that was loathed by a lot of people. Cadillac, the Cadillacs, and certainly the Buicks that they showed us are all about China. Maybe not the Escalade-sized all-electric, battery electric 7-seat SUV, but the rest of the Cadillacs, the Buicks, not so much the Chevrolet. But you know what? They're spreading their cards across their global markets. They're building cars that will sell in enough volume to get you where they need to be by 2025. We collectively, the people who went there, still disagree and battle among ourselves about how dedicated GM really is. Have they gotten religion, or are they still doing it reluctantly? But they're doing a really good show because they are pissed and jealous and angry and resentful at the stock market's valuation of Tesla, which doesn't make money, against them, which makes money consistently. I will leave you with that question.
Pissed and jealous.
And I think that's a fine place to say, we've done a good show. Let's do some shout outs and go home. Uncharacteristically, John, as our special guest, I'm going to start with you. If anything you want to plug, any shout outs or anything for?
I have an unspellable and unpronounceable last name, so I'm really easy to find online. My Twitter is John Voelcker, which is JOHN, V like Victor, V like Volt, not B like Volt. So JOHN, V like Victor, OELCKER. And you can find that name as a byline. I write for Green Car Report still, charged EVs. I've written for trucks.com. With luck, I will have a fairly lengthy analysis of this very GM event coming out within the next week on a new site, but I'm not going to name them because I'm superstitious, and so on and so forth. So that's where you find me.
And do follow John on Twitter. He's an excellent follow on Twitter. Absolutely. Let's go to Patrick.
Hello. I am happy to see more EVs. I hope they don't turn out to just be compliance cars. I'm happy to see General Motors actually returning to motors instead of being General Engines. Well
played.
Thank you. I am with the Oregon Electric Vehicle Association. You can find us at oeva.org, and we're on Facebook and Twitter. Follow us there. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Connor. Mr. Guzik, you're next.
I don't have a lot going on other than our shops move, and we are opening a used car lot in the near future, a separate facility from the repair shop. So there'll be news coming on that in the near future. But in the meantime, we have a couple of cars left at boulderh.com and our repair shop site, boulderhc.com. And if you live in Colorado, hit us up.
Now, I heard that if you buy a used car off your lot, you'll throw in 2 free Prius batteries. Is that true, or did I just make that up?
Sure.
Okay.
Used batteries.
But you got to carry them yourself to the car.
Yeah. I was just going to suggest if you live in the Front Range and you need a good workout, go help Paul move some of this heavy crap, okay? Just pick up a couple things, carry them over to the new shop. It's, all in the spirit of friendly helpfulness. And speaking of friendly helpfulness, Mr. Casey Green.
There we go. So I do a YouTube channel with hopefully helpful content on mostly Tesla ownership, but EVs, green cars, that's the focus. It's youtube.com/Casey Green. That's KACEYGREEN. And I'm about to upload a video about to start editing and then upload a video about the latest Tesla update. But during this show, there was a notification that there's already an update to the update. So look for that as well, coming out soon.
You've been musked on your own channel. Oh, that's cold, man. That's cold. Okay. Georgia.
Yes.
Anything you'd like to plug? Any shout outs? Anything?
Well, thank you guys for having me here. Sorry about the technical issues, but Microsoft. And you can hear me on Ostium Podcast, and you can follow updates on the Ostium Podcast. So you can listen to that while you're in your electric car, so you don't have to listen to the radio as you drive as far as that 200 kilowatt hour battery will take you. So it's ostiumpodcast.com or Ostium Podcast on Twitter.
Awesome. And definitely check that out. Mr. Coughlin.
Hello. Thanks very much for joining us. If you haven't already, please give us a thumbs up. Helps us get in the eyes of new viewers. We would really appreciate that. You can follow our group, the Waterloo Region Electric Vehicle Association, at WREVA Group on Twitter. And feel free to follow us there. Thanks very much.
Awesome. Thank you. And definitely listen to Mark's show, The Tesla Life, which, not coincidentally, takes place in the same night as this show. Because, like I said, not a coincidence. I want to do one quick shout out, and then I will turn it over to Mr. Schaefer. My shout out happens to do with our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/whatdrivesus. I want to thank each and every one, and I mean each and every one of you, 1,497 subscribers, 252 of which have stepped up and hit the subscribe button in the last 28 days. Thank you so much. That is so important, and it's been helpful. And keep doing that, please. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe at youtube.com/whatdrivesus. Share it with your friends. We appreciate that help. It costs you nothing and helps us enormously. So thank you for that. And Tony Schaefer, as I like to say, bring us home, my friend.
All right, the usual here. If you want to read the news that we're reading, be sure to check us out online. First of all, make sure you go to facebook.com/whatdrivesus. Patrick Connor does an excellent job of posting news. I don't know how you schedule it, Patrick, but it seems that it's a good, steady feed. It's not like all at once. It's spread out pretty good. So keep it up. You do a great job there. Also, if you use Flipboard as a news aggregator, like I do, look for the What Drives Us magazine. Philip Barclay and I primarily put the news that we're reading into Flipboard. Also, I'm going to, something I've never done before, I'm going to give a shout out to my wife, who is pretty much just on the other side of that door, listening to the Blackhawks play the San Jose Sharks, and I've heard her screaming throughout the last hour. So apparently it's a good game.
Do we know good how, or were they screams of joy or screams of anger?
I could easily pull up the page, and I'm not, because I don't want to
appreciate the restraint.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I very much appreciate your restraint. As always, I want to thank Michael Mannering for our amazing theme music. Visit him at manthing.com. You can buy his music everywhere but CD Baby. You don't ever buy anything on CD Baby. But do go to visit manthing.com. Support Michael as he has supported this show for the 10 years that it has been on. I want to thank all of our panelists. It's a huge panel today. It's so great. And our special guest, John Voelcker. So thank you, Casey Green, Mark Coughlin, Patrick Connor, who had to leave early, Paul Guzik, Georgia McKenzie, and of course, Tony Schaefer, and our special guest, John Voelcker. That's me, like, pointing at things on the screen that you can't see. Not super helpful, but nonetheless, I like to gesture on the show. Have you seen me before? I bet you have. Thanks to all of you for making a great show. I appreciate it's not often we get to do a deep dive on one topic. And if you hated this topic, my apologies. If you love this topic, you probably had a great show like me. So thanks very much. And once again, thanks to everybody who subscribes on YouTube. Thanks to our Patreon subscribers. And thanks to all of you who download or listen to the show every week. You folks are the reason we do it. That's all I got. Once again, I don't know. I keep wanting to say thanks. Tune in next week and find out what drives us. See you, everybody. Have a great week.